All right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all kinds of stuff leadership related. Thanks for joining us today. If you joined last week, we had Larry Post, arguably one of the most effective leaders and most influential leaders in my life and my career, here with us. And I got the opportunity to ask him all kinds of great questions and get his perspective and lots of great stories. He's always a great storyteller on leadership and what ultimately makes tomorrow's leader. So if you haven't gotten a chance to check that out, be sure to do so. Today I wanted to talk about a very common question that I get, and that is, how do you develop as a leader? How do I actually get better? And what are all the different ways that I can improve as a leader? And before answering that question, I think the most critical thing you have to do is you have to set the stage for you to be able to become a better leader, because there's all kinds of obstacles that I find that people have that are in their way that ultimately prevent people from becoming great leaders. And I've seen this time and time again, where somebody who has huge potential to become an outstanding leader, there are certain things that prevent them from developing at a fast rate. Now, in some cases, this could be the type of thing that gets you to a year where it might otherwise take you 2 or 3 years to get to. And ultimately, if I think about I want to become great at anything, I've got to use every possible means and resource to become as good as possible at that certain area of life. So leadership is no different. So let's talk about what some of the obstacles are, because there are absolutely some key ones that are, if you're aware of them, they're easy to remove or avoid. If you're not, they get in the way of big growth. First and foremost, and I see this more times than not, because the type of person that tends to get into leadership is somebody who has a lot of times a healthy level of self-esteem. They've got a lot of confidence. In some cases, that can lead to egos that ultimately are too big, and they prevent people from becoming or developing into becoming great leaders. And here's the reason why. And there's a fine line between confidence, having a healthy confidence and a healthy ego, and an ego that really becomes an obstacle for you. And confidence, as we talked about on one of our last podcasts, confidence is essential as a leader, not only to have it yourself, but to be able to lend it to other people and build it in other people. And that's another episode. We went deep on that topic. But ego is different, right? If you have too big of an ego, it really stunts your growth, because you feel that you have kind of this inflated level of self-worth or level of assessment in your own capabilities. And sometimes that prevents us then from seeking out opportunities to get better in that area. So that's a dangerous thing as a leader. And I'll give you an example. I've known leaders that might have been overall exceptional, or at least very good leaders overall, but there were 1 or 2 areas that they really needed to develop in. And where they could get that development might have been from another leader that overall didn't have as good of overall results. So that ego might get in the way of seeking help from somebody who might not be getting the overall results that they are, if that makes sense. A great leader, the people that really develop as fast as possible in this business, are people that put themselves in a situation which sometimes is vulnerable, because you're sharing with somebody, hey, I'd like to get your help, and seeking that help from all kinds of different people or sources or resources. And that's tough sometimes for somebody who's got a healthy ego, right? But ego, ultimately, I've seen that be a big obstacle to prevent people from becoming ultimately successful as a leader. You've got to kind of check that ego at the door. Let's talk about another really common one that I see come into play a lot with leaders. Now, we all have our why and what we came into this business and why we became a leader. There's certain things that drew us to this. It might have been having an impact and influence on as many people as possible. It might be because we enjoy the role of a leader and that type of responsibility. And for some people, it's the recognition, it's the income. It's okay. When you do a great job as a leader, those are all the rewards that come from it. But if we're overly focused in some of those short-term rewards, and I've seen leaders that have fallen into this trap, it prevents them from doing the things that a great leader has to do that might not result in a paycheck in the next 2 weeks. Okay, so if I'm too focused on the things that are bringing me short-term returns and rewards, then I'm ultimately going to not do the things that might not bring a short-term reward, but are critical to the success of a long-term leader, if that makes sense. I worked with somebody, I'll change the name, but I used to call him 2 Week Tommy. And this was a leader that I observed was always caught up in that 2-week paycheck, right? And because of that, it prevented him from doing those other things that were really laying the groundwork for long-term success. And other people saw that, right? If you're overly concerned with your paycheck as a leader, you're ultimately concerned with your rankings this week. Not that that's not good, you want to do that, but if you're too concerned about it, then it becomes, from the follower's perspective, all about you as the leader and not about them, not about their long-term growth, okay? And that ultimately breaks down trust, and I've seen leaders not develop fast because of that situation. Here's another one. Leaders oftentimes don't take the steps to actually study and be a student in this business and study leadership. There's all kinds of ways you can do that as a leader. So think about it. It's a little different leadership than other things. If I wanted to play a musical instrument, let's say I want to get great at playing the piano. Well, there's really one way that I'm going to become great at playing the piano, right? And that's playing the piano. I have to get in front of the piano. I've got to get a keyboard in front of me. I've got to take some lessons, but I'm not going to get better just by listening to music or reading about playing the piano or watching somebody play the piano, right? I'm not going to get better unless I'm actually doing it. Well, leadership is different though, right? I can actually develop as a leader by watching other people lead. Now, granted, I'm going to develop most from my own experiences, right? From doing the thing, from doing the role and learning from what I'm doing well, what I'm not doing well, the mistakes I'm making. Maybe I have a conversation with somebody and it drives the right behavior. I know, okay, I nailed it. Or, hey, I could see that didn't really make the impact I wanted to, or I make a bad decision or a good decision. But I can multiply my development. I can get exponential growth by doing that same exact thing with other people, right? I may be in an organization and be able to, at close, watch these things. I can have a really good vantage point of these different interactions. I also may take the time to study other leaders even outside of my organization, right? There's all kinds of leaders that are on a very big stage, very public stage, right? They might be celebrities, they might be politicians, they might be other types of leaders in our community that we have access to. So I can multiply my growth by learning not just from myself, but from everybody else, right? So a great leader does that. Beyond that, you learn in all kinds of other ways. I devour books and audio tapes. I watch podcasts, listen to podcasts. What you're doing right now, you're learning leadership. I interview people. That's how I learn as well. All kinds of ways as a leader that you can really throw yourself into it and get in a year where it might take somebody 3, 4, 5 years to get to otherwise. Okay, so are you taking all the steps that you need to and can to develop as a leader? Here's another big obstacle that I find people make. They oftentimes think that as a leader, they need to be the smartest person in the room, or they need to be the best in the room at whatever task it is, right? Not the case. Not the case at all. In fact, if I have that mentality, that is going to hold me back. If part of me feeling secure as a leader is that I need to be the smartest person in the room, well, guess what? Unless I'm off the charts, Mensa brilliant, I'm not going to hire very smart people, right? Because I'm trying to focus on hiring people that are going to make me look smart. Well, guess what? I'm not the smartest person. That would not lead to a great organization. You have to be focused on hiring and bringing people into your organization that are better than you. Steve Jobs used to say that all the time. Hey, listen, why would we hire smart people and then tell them what to do? We hire smart people and they tell us what to do. He was a huge believer in that. As smart as he was and as brilliant and creative as he was, he knew the value of surrounding himself with people that he felt were even better than him. Great leaders look that way and think that way. Here's another interesting category. There's certain human tendencies that we get caught up in that as a leader, it's really easy to allow that to affect our ability to develop as a leader and be really effective as a leader. And I'll give you an example. And we all know people, for example, that present themselves to be somebody that they're not. All it takes is opening up Facebook or Instagram, and there are people in your social circle, maybe your family, close friends even, that you can look and you can see and look at their Facebook profile or Instagram or other social media and say, wow, you know what? That looks great, but I know the real person and that's not who they are, right? That's not their life. That's not a good thing as a leader, right? We all have that human tendency, most people do, to want to portray themselves better as they are. Now, it may work in social media. It may work in some situations. As a leader, when you're working with followers who are around you all the time, if you're not authentic, they're going to catch on to that, right? If I'm pretending to be somebody that I'm really not, well, it's going to take probably not too long for them to figure that out, and then trust starts to break down, right? And then they start to feel like, okay, does this person have a hidden agenda? Are they trying to present everything a different way than reality is? And that ultimately, I've seen that really take down potentially great leaders, trying to be somebody that they're really not. Another great example too that holds people back is the need to be liked. We all feel we want to have friends, we want people to like us, we want to be popular, but as a leader, if we're too focused on that, that's going to hold us back, right? Because we ultimately will not make the tough decisions that might be the right decisions, but they're going to be unpopular. Great leaders oftentimes have to take a tough stance and make decisions that are not going to please everybody, but it is actually the good for the good of the organization, right? Can't please everybody all the time. We can please all the people some of the time, or some of the people all the time. Can't please all the people all the time, right? That's a flaw that sometimes leaders get caught up in too much. And what goes along with that is they avoid conflict, right? We're not wired, most of us, in nature to confront people. Some people are, some people embrace that, but in general, we're not as in society, when we see somebody at a party, we're not necessarily pointing out their flaws or their weaknesses. But as a leader, you have to be really good at giving feedback, which means as a leader, my job is to tell you when I see you doing something right, and also when I see you doing something that's not leading you toward your goals, or something that's leading you in a bad place, right? I need to be able to have that open dialogue with you, and unless I do that, that's ultimately not going to help you develop as fast as possible. But we're usually not wired that way in life, right? We're not used to telling people, especially friends or others, sometimes that, hey, this is what you're doing, you got to change this. Some people are, but as a leader, that's critical. You have to be able to do that. One of the things that I see oftentimes, and this is a great example, as you heard this from Larry Post last week, where he talked about the brilliance of simplicity, right? There's some leaders, some people that tend to overcomplicate things. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just something that could be very simple, and they tend to make it really, it could be just a simple decision that they overthink and becomes too complicated. It could be a process. It could be overall a communication, a message that becomes more complicated than it needs to be. There is beauty in simplicity. As human beings, our tendency is to go the easiest path. We do this with everything. I mean, everything in life. Just think about society. The best companies have come about because they've made things easier. Uber has made transportation easier. Netflix has made watching movies easier. iPhone has made doing all kinds of things easier from the palm of our hand, right? So life in general, we move in the direction of what's easiest. And a leader's job is to help people do things in the easiest way fashion that's going to make the most sense. If I, as a leader, tend to make things complicated, I'm going to lose followers just because of that, for no other reason. I went in to buy golf clubs, and I knew exactly what I wanted to get. I'd done the research. I was the easiest sale this person could ever imagine. I walked in, and I said, he came up and asked me if he could help me. I said, absolutely. I said, I've done my research. I know exactly what clubs I want. These clubs, I'm 6'3", obviously tall. I need to get them fitted. So can you help me with that? He said, absolutely. He brought me to the back. He said, okay, just swing the clubs here. He watched me swing them for a little bit. And he said, okay, I know what you need to do. We need to add an inch onto each club. I said, okay, great. That's simple enough. Let's do it. And he said, but you know what? Just swing it a little bit more. Let me take another look. I said, okay. So I swung the clubs. And he said, we might actually just be able to add an inch on the longer clubs and leave the shorter clubs as they are. And I said, okay, whatever you think. And he said, you know what, just swing again for me. And I swung the clubs again. And he said, you know what, after looking at your swing, you probably could leave them as is. I don't even think we need to make any changes to them. And I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. And I left. I actually left that store because it was too complicated. The process was too complicated. And I went down to another store and it was easy as can be. He said, okay, here's what you need to do. Done. Process was simple. I actually took extra time out of my day because it was inconvenient to go find another store. I really wanted to buy them at the first store. I went out of my way because the process was too complicated. All I wanted was help. I just wanted a simple answer, right? And it could have been, and it was. And that's ultimately the direction that I went. So people do that all the time. Great leaders have a way of simplifying even the most complex things. Leaders that ultimately don't have success sometimes are masters at even taking things that are already simple and making them overly complicated. We all know people like that, I'm sure, in our lives. So I hope this was helpful today. These, again, before really becoming tomorrow's leader and developing, there's all kinds of ways we're going to talk about things that you can do to become a better leader and different attributes and characteristics. But let's start with how do we clear the path so we can ultimately become tomorrow's leader. If you enjoyed today, make sure you subscribe so you get all of our future podcasts. Make sure you put some comments and like and share. I appreciate all your support. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.